The village of Streamwood was incorporated in 1957 in the far west suburbs of Chicago. By 1966, though, Streamwood had grown into a community that wanted its own library. The chief architects of planning that library were Sid Cato, an Army corporal who had moved to Streamwood after serving, and Mrs. Marlene Duell, who ardently wanted her community to have a library. With Sid's connections and Marlene's drive, they quickly became the president and vice president of a Streamwood Library Board of Trustees. The first public library in Streamwood was run out of a garage. At the beginning of 1967, the garage library was open for business 9 hours a week and had a collection of 5,000 donated volumes. But plans were already underway on a temporary library location until a full-size library could be built. A 4,400 square foot store space was donated to become the Streamwood Public Library. It might still be called that today had the neighboring village of Hanover Park not lost its library in 1973. It was decided to establish a Poplar Creek Public Library District that would continue to encompass all of Streamwood, but also all of Hanover Park, which was not in Schaumburg Township. The site of the proposed new Streamwood Library would become the Poplar Creek Public Library. From a rough map, the plans passed into the hands of professional architects with a $2 million budget. After a modest groundbreaking, and slightly behind schedule, the new library was completed and opened its doors. It had the capability of housing 210,000 books and was expected to be big enough for the community for the next 20 years. It had a seating capacity 5 times larger than the old facility. The library had a large building now, but continued to expand in other ways, adding young adult services and a government documents department. The library became a federal depository in 1980 and a state depository soon thereafter. But the truly transformative change in librarianship was expanding into the computer age. Although the library retained its card catalog until 2005, it had a computerized circulation system since 1983. 5 years later, the librarians began using CD-ROMs to answer reference questions. In 1990, the library had its first online public access catalog computer terminal. 3 years later, the librarians could use the internet, then only possessing a fraction of the information it holds today, to answer questions. In 1997, Netscape Navigator was the library's web browser, and Alta Vista was seen as the leading search engine. 2 years later, library staff was using Google. In 2002, staff began training its patrons in the use of the World Wide Web. The library district itself was growing over time, and by now it was clear that it was too inconvenient for many of the people living at the south end of the district to use the main library. A branch library was opened at 4300 Audrey Lane in Hanover Park in 1991, later renamed the Sonia Crawshaw branch, and was redesigned in 2013 to make better use of its space, having made it through 22 years in the space originally allotted to it. The makeup of the community was changing as well. The library began to purchase materials in Spanish in 1994 and was advertising library program bilingually in English and Spanish as of 2004. A year earlier, the library held its first program in Polish. Back in 1991, it was clear that the architect's estimate that the main building would meet the community's needs until 1998 may have been overestimated. To make space for rapidly growing departments, a lower-level courtyard was filled in and made into workspace. But even this was seen as a stopgap measure. At some point, the library was going to need a major expansion. In 2004, new architects were hired to plan the library's renovation. In 2008, the main library closed down temporarily, and its staff operated out of a temporary site in a storefront just 1 block away from the old Streamwood Library storefront. The library's east parking lot was built over, both above and below ground. doubling the library's size. A year later, in the fall of 2009, the library reopened for business, much improved. In 2011, Library Journal designated PCPL its first landmark library. Since then, PCPL has expanded access to its many computer terminals with visitors' passes, wowed audiences and judges alike in the annual summer celebration parades, and has expanded its programming to include movies and more family activities. PCPL, Poplar Creek Public Library. Your library.